There we go.
Well, hello, mate.
How are you, man?
Good. Is this the first time you've Instagram lived?
No, I've done it a couple of times, but we had a bit of a problem this time, but it's okay.
That's all right. Goes
How are
along
you?
with hanging out with me. I'm good.
Yeah,
Hey,
let's see.
congratulations. Is that in order for you?
Oh, thank you.
Your steed did well yesterday and the weekend.
Yeah, he played nicely. Played well. Yeah, yeah. It's coming on, for the fact that it's probably about 50% there. Yeah, so
That's amazing. Hey, let me ask you a question about that. So when you take on somebody, of that kind of caliber, how do you kind of, some of the things I want to talk about is like kind of inside the coaching arena. How do you go through a process in your head of deciding, what you feel is a reasonable path, and, how do you interact with the player, and, how do you make the decisions that you make, and in order to say that statement that, he's kind of halfway there?
it's a lot of years doing it, Terry, and a lot of instinct, as far
Right.
as trying to figure out, how a person's mind works. Fact is, actually, I'm really enjoying working with him because he's so, he really is very focused on what he wants. And he doesn't care about the money. It's just purely trophies.
Yeah.
And he said, listen, I really want to get this right. And he said, I've got the game that even if things aren't 100%, I can still get it around.
That's
which
right.
He can.
Right.
You have to bear in mind that here's a guy who's, despite all the success that he's had, he's never been inside the top 100 in fairways hit or greens in regulation since he'd been on tour.
Incredible.
So you would think that if you can get his ball striking anywhere up near where the short game is, what can the guy do? So
Right.
it's sort of exciting. There's a lot of work. We do a lot of work in a lot of different areas, even from a nutritional standpoint, a working out standpoint. Not me personally, but I've got people who are involved doing it. So you're helping to design a program, really. So
Right.
So it's a lot of fun, actually. It's enjoyable, and he's a really good guy to work with. He's a controversial character, but he's really a good guy. A lot of people don't realize.
I was lucky enough to spend some time with him, and to your point, incredibly precise and focused with his questions. He thinks them through, and his question
thoughtful. And
to me was
his wife may be more thoughtful.
Yeah.
That's a funny thing, but
I don't know his wife, so I can't comment, fortunately.
She's a pistol. She knows. Funny story about her. She knows a lot about clubs. He actually has his own club company now, Grindworks, which is a Japanese company that they make some beautiful looking irons. Mm-hmm. And she's highly involved in the sort of the design and production. She knows a lot about equipment. They were playing a practice round. This is when she was caddying for Patrick, and they were playing with Tiger, and they were standing in the middle, I don't know, whatever, a par five, and they were just waiting. And she goes over to his bag, wanders over, and has a look, and said, "Tiger, this 3-wood shaft, I don't think suits you at all. This is not a good shaft for you." And so Tiger looks at Patrick, and Patrick rolls his eyes. Well, sure enough, the next week he had a new shaft in his 3-wood.
Oh, that's funny. I think, in our business, I think if you're in and around the business for a long time, curiosity is a key, component that probably has driven you throughout your career, I would think. Mm-hmm. And, in her position or in our position or whatever, I think if you're really curious about how each of the different kind of limbs of the tree are working, then you end up garnering quite a lot of information, I would say, just through being interested, right? It's not like you don't need a degree in club fitting to do that. You need to be paying attention to the details when they're being presented.
And you pick up little things, and you get a feel, in a sense, because really, as a coach, to be able to get that knowledge across, you've really got to get inside their brains to figure out, how they're thinking. So you've got to put yourself in their position, and that's the challenging part of coaching, because it's like you can't just, that's why artificial intelligence is not going to help the tour player. You might get the knowledge, but it's like how you communicate it.
That's right. There's two things that you're saying: is get inside their head, put yourself in their shoes is one piece, and then once you gather that data point, how do you then communicate and convey that? So it comes out of their shoes into your shoes and back into their shoes.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously one of the advantages I've had through the years is working with so many different players and so many different characters and so many different mindsets that you sort of learn, and you feed off that, and you start to expand your knowledge and understanding of, okay, this will work with this person, this won't work with that person. You know, sort of have a feel for it. I mean, it's an instinct, right?
It is.
You know, you sort of, it's like, just asking a tour player, well, okay, hit this this left of the flag and see if you can cut it, 15 feet. Okay, and they do it. They say, well, how'd you do that? He says, I don't know. I just did it, So it's one of those instinctive things, right?
Yeah, there's a book, I don't know if you ever read it. It was called Blink, and it was saying something similar, like, based on your combined experience, that you have these incredibly genius moments, and you have no idea where it comes from. It's almost like, the player goes, you know what, I wore a red shirt and suddenly it all came together. But the reality is it's a product of, many years in the trenches, as it were.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, it's like, there's no substitute for experience, that's for sure. So,
and I think it's kind of interesting, talking about players and comparing coaches and players, that, and your career is an incredible example on so many levels. Part of it is the roller coaster of our business, right? In terms of, I mean, you were ranked as the top teacher in the world for many, many years. And if I bet you any money, I'd say you probably think you're a better teacher today than, 10 years ago, right?
Probably, yeah. No, not probably, definitely. Yeah,
right.
I mean, yeah, for sure.
And then, so you have there's the perception that you're great because of whatever reasons, and then you're terrible for a number of reasons. But the reality is you're just, your stock is just gradually accumulating internally, right? So your ability to communicate, your ability to read people.
It's not like you're missing a cut every week, but
sometimes.
But yeah,
I sometimes miss the cut 3 times in 1 week.
Yeah, it's the sort of the age we live in, right? It's like, hey, you did this, you did that, it's. I mean, look, I've had my time in the sun. It's been great, and so I mean, look, right now this is a bonus. All this, I mean, I enjoy it. It's not like it's fun to do, and however people look at you and whatever they think of you as a coach or a teacher, even that wanker Brownell Chambly. I mean, the fact of the matter is that you do the best you can, and it's how people perceive you. That's up to them. But it's like, in the end, it's like, you just live with yourself, right? The fact that hey, I've done the best job I can do, and it doesn't. Nothing's forever. I mean, things change. I mean, it's like, it's not like, I mean, it's like, look, I've worked with Ben on for 5 years, and he's working with Sean Foley now. So it's like, what I mean, look, sometimes a fresh set of eyes is not the worst thing in the world. Maybe he might check on his putting stats rather than his ball striking.
Yeah, his ball striking has been pretty good.
It's just the way it is, and sometimes you need to freshen things up regardless. So it's like a marriage, right? I mean, honeymoon period, and sometimes that honeymoon period extend into a long period of time. That's why you have to admire, Spieth, the fact that he's stuck with, they've stuck with each other.
Right.
And, hey, maybe a fresh set of eyes may, even as a consultant, maybe sometimes good, because you don't want to maybe limit yourself to, I mean, it's interesting that Victor Hovland, I mean, he tries to pick a lot of people's brains. He looks at, he goes on YouTube and looks at things.
Isn't that amazing?
Tries things out. He doesn't have a full-time coach per se. He's just like, no, I want to try this, try that. And
you look at someone like VJ, it seems like, he's pretty much tried to pick people's brains over the years and not really stick to anything for any period of time, coach-wise.
I mean, it's like, man, you can go way back there. I mean, that's a Gary Player deal, I mean, geez, I mean, try this, try that, and, talent plays a big role, right?
Right. So you've been kind of the bridge between, no teaching business and an incredibly thriving teaching business. It's been pretty cool journey, right? So when you started teaching, tour players and going out on tour, who else was kind of out there? Was there a lot of teachers teaching tour players, or was it just kind of starting out?
when I remember honestly at one tournament, I think I probably had about close to 20 players.
I remember.
When I say working with, the fact that I had a video camera, one of those old VHS cameras, was, with those things that, you almost need a Sherpa to carry it.
Well, luckily for you had a bunch of Sherpas, so you're good.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, look, John Jacobs a little bit in the UK.
Right.
I mean, he was around. I mean, probably Jimmy Ballard, and actually sort of my mentor, really, because, where I obviously grew up in Southern Africa, my mentor was Phil Ritson, and Phil Ritson actually was way ahead of his time. And, he was coaching a lot of tour players. They actually used to come and see him rather than him go out on tour.
Right.
So, I mean, I was maybe one of the first traveling tour coaches, shall we say. I used to go up to quite a few tournaments, with Nick Price and Dennis Watts. I mean, all my old cronies from Africa, really, and Dave Costa and all these sort of people. But and it sort of really spawned from there, I suppose. And so, yeah, there weren't really. I mean, I don't remember. I mean, Bob Toski. You heard about Tom Kite visiting Bob Toski.
Right.
I mean, they would sort of visit them. They didn't sort of travel with the players like I did. So, which I did for a period of time, and. And I did that actually on the men's and the women's tour, mainly because my wife Kelly was playing, and I sort of went out there and worked with a few of the girls out there as well. So it was, it was interesting. I mean, it was like I was sort of a locum sort of coach, if you will.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, really, very, very, very few. I mean, it so much so that you think back in the day, very few players had coaches. I mean, whereas today, I mean, you're right, there's an exception if you don't, maybe the other Bubba Watson or whatever, but for the most part, I mean, some coach, I mean, whether it be a mental coach or a short game coach or a putting coach or whatever, there's all sorts of coaches out there now.
Yeah, so you had so many players that you needed some guys to help you. So what's interesting, I always rate, teachers that have a pretty good kind of teaching tree. You look at you and, Jim McLean and obviously Mike Adams, and there's a handful of teachers that have spawned kind of an environment where other teachers come through, right? Which I can speak for myself, having worked for you 25 years ago. That it's partially the education, but it's also the type of people that you attracted. Very curious, very keen to learn and things like that. So the environment was very cool, which I think these days it's kind of interesting. Part of the reason I do these interviews is I played with a guy recently down in Jupiter, and he's like, well, how do you golf teachers even get educated? It's like, for him, it's like, how do I even differentiate, right? And so how did you kind of cut your teeth, as it were? I mean, obviously you're very intelligent and very curious.
Well, thank you.
And obviously, and
it's interesting. I don't know, the game itself really interests me at a very young age. I mean, I turned pro when I was 17. A lot of people don't know that, but I mean, that was I sort of, I was attempting to go to sort of university for about 6 months, and that was about it. But so I actually lasted 2 months longer than Nick Faldo, who's went to 4 months, I think it was.
That's funny, yeah.
And I think Sandy Lyle actually went for 1 month, maybe.
I was going to say Colin Montgomery wasn't that long either, I don't think.
No, not too long. But anyway, so I was always interested, and it was, I mean, Ben Hogan, the Ben Hogan Modern Fundamentals was sort of my Bible back in the day. And I was always trying things, and, all the latest, you couldn't wait for sort of, well, as it was then, Golf World from the UK and Golf Monthly and Golf Digest coming out and see what the latest articles were. And, let's go try that, So you're working on Mrs. Haversack, trying to supinate the left wrist through impact. We'll see how this works today, And so, you experiment yourself and you try it. And I mean, look, I was a decent player. I mean, I played a few tournaments and played a couple of European tour events and played in South Africa and so on. But I mean, it's like the mental side of it really was the thing that got me. I mean, I just couldn't handle the fact that I just couldn't hit it like when I practiced, or on a practice tee or practice right. It's like just drove me crazy. And so I think if I probably knew then what I know now about maybe the mental side of the game, it would have been a lot better. But nevertheless, I mean, look, I look, my peers, that's people were really great players. You know, people like Nick Price and Dennis Watts, who won all these guys won the World Series. It was funny. And then somebody like a Mark McNulty, who was a great player back in the day.
Yeah, no, I remember.
You know, so it was, you know, so I got into teaching at a very young age, and I really enjoyed it, just helping people. And I mean, you know, just, you know, I mean, it was sort of, I'd hustle people for lessons, you know, just to make some money so I could go out and play a little bit and so on. But I, you know, I really enjoyed the teaching side of it. And it's you know, it's rewarding. I mean, look, forget the financial side. It's just rewarding, helping people and seeing people, you know, smile and say, whoa, you know. And so, I mean, I went through a lot of things in the early days, and you sort of, it was trial and error. It was like, okay, let's try this, let's try that. And I read a lot. I had, you know, I've still got a huge library of books there, which, you know, going back to the 19th century on golf instruction. So, I mean, it's interesting, you know, as much as things have changed, so they remain the same.
That's right.
To work out how to get that little white ball in the hole. But it's so I mean, I've always had a sort of a mind that sort of looks at things, and I don't know. I feel very fortunate. I mean, my good friend JJ Rivet, the biomechanist, he said, you've got biomechanical eyes. And I didn't really understand. He said, yeah, you're able to sort of see and feel. And my grandfather actually was one of the UK's leading osteopaths, and he was blind.
Wow.
And he, you know, so people used to come from all over the UK and Europe to sort of see him. And so I don't know, maybe I inherited some of that from him. I don't know. But, you know, teaching is sort of, it's interesting. I mean, knowledge, having all the knowledge is great, but being able to communicate, you know, in different ways to different people, it is, you know, it's, I wouldn't say it's an art, but it's, you know, it's the science involved. And
I think it's a skill.
There's a skill. Yeah, there's a skill involved, obviously. And so it's, you know, it's, to me, it's always rewarding when you come up with something, that really, I know that's the key for this person. And so, and you almost have to convince yourself, first of all, that, okay, this is going to work. And you might try 2 or 3 different things. Let's face it, I mean, we're not, you know, we don't necessarily hit on it straight away, but it's such a, you know, teaching and coaching. I mean, there's a difference, as we know. Teaching is sort of explaining what the issues are and where we need to get to, and coaching is really reinforcing, you know, on a regular basis.
I have a way of describing that is teaching is stuffing in and coaching is pulling out. So no, it's a little less eloquent way of saying it. It's not bad.
Yeah. You've done a lot in the last 25 years there, Terry.
That's all I got, you know.
No.
So, you know, reading all those books, how did transitioning into writing come to you? Is it easy? Do you find it easy to sit down and create, or you have kind of writer's block, or?
You know, actually, in the early years, I mean, I've probably got writer's block now. I'm in the middle of writing a book, which seems to be taking me an inordinate amount of time. But, you know, you really got to sort of sit and focus. And it's, I mean, writing a book is not easy. I remember I wrote a book on Ben Hogan. They found all the pictures of Ben Hogan, all the photographs of Ben Hogan that they did to do all the illustrations. And so somebody said to me, he said, hey, listen, we've got these pictures, you've got these photographs. Do you want to actually, you want to write a book on them? And I said, well, that's, you know, I wouldn't mind doing that. I mean, we had some fantastic photographs. And so I wrote that book. Honestly, it nearly killed me because I did it in about 5 months.
Wow.
The deadline. And it was like, oh, I mean, because the book probably will take you, if you do it properly, you know, because remember, we're doing other things as well. We're not just sitting on a...
Did you promise the book that you're going to be there at 10 a.m. and you turned up at 3 p.m.?
my normal.
Yeah.
Right. See, the key to teaching, if you know, is I always say, look, if you book your lessons as a coach, okay, you always put ish on the end, right? I'll be there at 9-ish. Okay, so
I'm in that camp now. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because that way nobody gets mad or upset, and you know, can practice a little bit on their own, you know. So, but no, but you know, writing is it's, you know, I've always had sort of a ghostwriter, but I have to honestly say, hand on heart, that actually I did most of the work, and you know, the so-called, you know, my co-authors that did a lot of the grammar and what have you. But I as I say, I actually, my first book, The Golf Swing, which was very, very successful, which I was really styled on Ben Hogan's book. And
yeah,
I love the layout of the simplicity.
It's a very bold title, by the way. The Golf Swing.
The Golf Swing. Yeah, actually, there was another book out called The Golf Swing as well. I can't remember who wrote it, but there was. But yeah, it's.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's simple. It says it all, right?
That's right. I have to say this. I'll say this first. It was interesting times, right? Because you've been an innovator in terms of how to create a teaching business as well. And, so I remember sitting watching the Masters in probably 89 with my dad, back in England. And, in between, we were kind of watching the first video that you made. And so it's kind of interesting how things have, evolved. And,
was that the one we did with Nick Faldo, you mean?
No, it was the guy. It was. Bill, that's it.
Yeah, Bill. Yeah, Bill. The story behind Bill was, he was actually a +2 handicap who we sort of spent about 3 months making him into about a 15. so he was actually really good as far as being able to sort of, to really implant all these faults into him. And it was amazing how in the space of, we put a proviso at the end of the video saying, well, listen, we did it over a short period of time because because we did it, say, okay, now I want you to go away and practice it, don't come back, and blah, blah, blah. And so, I mean, he looked really good after a few months, but literally it was only probably about, a day or two later, So, but
it's a miracle.
It got the point across, though, because, people learn by seeing and visualizing, and so some of the obviously the habits that we implanted were typical of most golfers, amateur golfers anyway, middle handicappers, shall we say, which is really what the tape was aimed at. And so we, through doing little drills and exercises, because look, let's face it, I mean, look, everybody wants to improve and get better, and I think the problem in today's game is that, especially with social media, everybody going on YouTube and what have you, with the 7 million pieces of advice or whatever there is out there, it's more quick fix than it ever used to be, which is
that's right.
Because and people, having said that, people have less time to actually work at it and play at it, so they go, oh, well, let's try this. Well, that doesn't work. Okay, well, we've got another 6 million whatever to go. So it's golf is a game where, look, you've got to work at it slowly but surely. And that's why it's interesting, working with Patrick Reed, because I said to him, look, we're not doing, when I worked with Nick Faldo, basically it was like, okay, well, throw the book at me. I don't care how long this takes. And we sort of both went at it. And we knew it was going to take a while. I mean, probably if we had the technology we had today, we might have shortcut it to a certain extent. But, it took literally 2 years, and that's what we figured on initially. And so, I mean, you couldn't do that today. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to tell Pat, well, listen, you're going to play rubbish for the next 2 years. Don't worry about it. Just forget your world rankings and sponsors and blah, blah, blah. You can't do it. So now it's a sort of, it's a work in progress, right? You got to sort of work at it and, figure out, okay, well, little steps. You can't just sort of make these monumental changes. I mean, it's like little by little by little. And so, it's interesting how we've changed our approach to coaching now and teaching.
Yeah. And there's a lot more, mouths at the table, right? I mean, in terms of taking the attention of the player. I mean, you had a pretty good team around you back in when I started, which was late 90s. You had, a mental guy and a fitness guy. And, so there's a lot of demand for the attention of the player as well. So it's making sure when you get your time that you get really good quality time and get your point across, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I've always believed in the holistic approach to teaching and coaching, because there's more to it than just swing technique, obviously. And I sort of try to surround myself with people who, I mean, I like to say I know a lot, and I know a fair amount, but I'm not an expert in everything. I mean, you can't, rather be, you can't be a jack of all trades and master of none sort of thing. So, I mean, having that access to these sort of types of people, whether it be psychologists or nutritionists or workout experts or whatever the case, it's interesting now, because there's a big pie here, and you've got to cover all these areas. If you want to be at the top of your game in this day and age with the quality of play and the quality of talent around, I mean, you've got to cover all the areas. It's not
That's
just the one aspect. I mean, look, first of all, you've got to have a player with talent, and you've got to have a player with desire, and but then you've got to add all those other ingredients. And I think really I call myself a facilitator now, because you're really facilitating the ability that a player has access to all this sort of information, whether it be statistics now and so on. I mean, so it's like, so it's these the little edge that really, which allows a player to sort of maybe just move up the ladder a little more.
Yeah, your buddy Gary Player. It's actually a funny story. I put a post on Instagram, and he, his grandson saw it and showed it to him, and 20 minutes later he's like, "Gary wants to talk to you." So we end up doing an interview like this, and it was a lot of fun. And
I saw that. It was really interesting. I love Gary. He's like,
see how I strung him along for an hour? That was pretty good.
Growing up in, even though I was born in England, growing up in Africa, I remember I think I was 12 years old, and he was playing an exhibition at the club. It was Royal Salisbury, it was called at the time. He was playing with, I think it was either Billy Casper or Bob Charles. One or two, I can't remember now. But anyway, so I was seconded to Gary Player. So when he arrived, he arrived and he's got his big Dunlop bag, a huge bag of balls, which was about bigger than I was, I think. And he said, and I always remind him of this now. And so somebody said, "Okay, get the practice bag out of the." We won't call it a shag bag, because that's a different connotation, and
especially in the UK.
When Tom Watson went into the pro shop and asked for a shag bag, they sort of looked at him twice, I think. But anyway,
no, but we have some really nice fanny packs.
That's right. Exactly. So anyway, Judy got this bag out, and sort of lifted. I don't know how many balls were in there, probably a couple of 100, 300 balls, brand new balls. And I'm lifting and saying, "Woof, this thing's heavy," He said, let that be a lesson to you, Sonny. I said, "What's that, Mr. Player?" He said, "Never before you play, ever pick up anything heavy, okay? It'll ruin your feel." And I always remember that,
That's
so, yeah.
So one of the discussions we were having is, he feels slightly put out that, people say that players are better these days. I would say, as an interesting comparison, I think, the great players are obviously great, but it seems like the gap, to your point earlier, saying it's all about incremental gains. The gap is definitely getting smaller these days. I mean, you watch leaderboards just like I do, and when your guy makes a double, I mean, they go from 15th to 65th. It's unbelievably tight these days.
Yeah,
and so
I think there were great players back in his day and prior to Gary, so you go back in the day, but it's the depth of players now, the number of really top players. I mean, look, anybody can win any week, right? I mean, where it used to be a bit like tennis, well, still is probably. I mean, the fact that you get the top four, top three, who basically, they're going to get to the semis every week, right? But and in golf, that was pretty much the case. I mean, you had your probably 10 players, the Trevinos, the Palm, the Nicklases, Gary, and John Miller and Weisskopf and whatever. But I mean, they're probably maybe a dozen players, say. But now it could be 150 players, right? That's the difference. I mean, the quality and so it's not. I think back then you could probably say it was like talent that got players to where they got to. Now it's like, it's talent, but it's athleticism, it's technique, it's equipment, it's whole lot of other factors that go into determining, and it's still up here. This, certainly. I mean, that's probably obviously the biggest difference between sort of a good player and a great player. I mean, for sure. I mean, but it's it is. It's look, everything's evolved. I mean, you've got more 100-meter runners breaking 10 seconds now than you ever had, say, 10 years ago, where you had maybe one or two. Now you've got virtually everybody.
So Craig raises a good point. Is I'll say, is technology responsible for some of the parity? I would say that maybe some of the trial and error is narrowed somewhat.
Yeah, well, look, equipment. Having spent so much time with Callaway, I've been with Callaway way over 20 years now, and just the advances that they've made over that period of time. I mean, it was very much, I say, it was trial and error. Oh yeah, this looks good, this feels good. Okay, let's go with it. You know, and so that, I mean, that was when Big Bertha just came out. And but you know, now, I mean, look, you've got, it doesn't take much to actually really precisely fit a player, not only with the club head and obviously adjustable head and the shaft, but also the ball. I mean, so it's you know, finding the ball that spins the correct amount and so on. So it's I mean, it's a very precise game now, and I think the science and the technology is sort of getting to a point where yes, it's allowing a player, whereas before, I mean, look, a player might have played for a year, you know, with the wrong fitting shafts, or the lie wasn't correct, and they weren't able to, you know, so it was all sort of done by feel. I'll stick a little bit of lead tape on the toe here, you know, affect the shape.
A bit of mysticism went a long way in those days.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I say it's. I mean, it was interesting, but it's like, you know, now, I mean, when you think about it, it's like it's very, very precise. And I mean, players have equipment, I mean, that is absolutely perfectly fitted to them. So yeah, that's one element that they can take out of the equation as far as, well, is it my equipment or is it me? You know, so, and you know, which is obviously filtered down to some extent to the average golfer. So, all right, the average golfer is playing with much better equipment, much easier equipment, much more playable equipment. But it is interesting, though, Terry, how with all the technology and everything else that's out there, how the standard of golf really hasn't really improved with the masses. Yeah. And I mean, we know it's a damn difficult game. It's not an easy sport to play, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. But it's you know, I think I'm probably getting facilitator, but one of my gripes with instruction these days is so much is geared towards a really good player. Yeah. So I mean, which is 0.001%, of, you know, the golfing population. So all the stuff out there, I mean, it's all great, and they look at stuff, but I mean, you know, somebody, you know, trying to get some hints from Dustin Johnson here, who's sort of a supreme athlete. I mean, it's a complete waste of time. You know?
That's a really good example. You know, from a multifaceted approach almost. It's like, I remember there was a certain shaft came out, you know, 15 years ago, and somebody won, and so everyone started using that shaft, right? I mean, it's like, you know, Jack Nicklaus won with whatever driver, you know, a bunch of people use that driver, and the same with swing theory, right? And so, you know, if you watch Instagram, you know, any given week that Dustin Johnson wins, everyone's talking about his, you know, his bowed left wrist, or, you know, so different things are, you know, just, I think that's part of the challenge of the golf instruction or the golf improvement business or the golf improvement scene, is that people just don't know how to filter, you know, the information down to, you know, how do I go back to almost like first principles? What do I need to do to hit it in the middle of the club face? You know, how do I take the curve out of it? You know, how do I not hit the ground before the ball? You know, some of these really basic, you know, first principles that people jump 7 steps and they go, okay, now I've got to do this with my wrist and drive my leg like this, but they never follow it up with, in order to hit the middle of the club face, in order to, you know, hit the ball before the ground, or, you know, stuff like that. And so it's kind of interesting.
It is. And you know, and I honestly would say, I mean, look, I mean, I've had the good fortune to sort of meet and chat to many great teachers through the years. And they're really, when I think about it, I've never seen anybody, you know, quicker than the late, great John Jacobs get people to hit the ball better, quicker. And in a simple, I mean, no video. I mean, it's like, okay, that's the way we set up to it. It's, you know, his whole theory was basically, well, it's 2 turns in the switch, isn't it? You know, that's, I mean, that's pretty basic. But I mean, it is interesting. I mean, look, I mean, so many golfers out there, they would be far better off simplifying things than complicating things. And I know, you know, as coaches and teachers, we want to sort of really get into it and explain. You look at TrackMan. I mean, there's some. I mean, a lot of players. I mean, they don't make 2 swings the same. So I mean, which numbers do you read? You know. So I mean, look, if you're dealing with a, you know, with a really good player or a top junior or a college player or, you know, tour professional, whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, you know, you're getting sort of a pattern that's going, but I mean, it is interesting, because I mean, that's why I think this bifurcation, this word that's used, you know, I mean, as far as equipment is concerned, I mean, I think it's crazy that, you know, that there isn't the ability for the average golfer to use equipment. I mean, Callaway have got, clubs out now which are sort of very anti-slice, but I mean, there should be, you could make a golf club which never goes to the right. I mean, right. So, and for the most part, even with, people's lousy swings, they could hit the ball probably 20 yards further if the rules allowed it. So why not? I mean, the game's meant to be fun. It's meant to be, I just, look, you have it in baseball in America, the fact they're using different equipment. So why can't they use different equipment in golf? I mean, it's fairly similar, but I mean, the fact is that, it's like that would be a new title for a new book, How to Play Bad Golf Well.
Well, that was Bad Golf My Way, which is a very funny book. Leslie Nielsen, you remember that?
Yeah.
He had like 12 different, the old ball flight chart, 12 different pictures of a slice, and then one to the left in pink with a star, and it said, for reference purposes only.
Yeah.
Cleveland came out with a driver, I don't know, must have been 10 or 12 years ago, that, eventually got banned because it was too fast. And if you went on eBay at that time, that one was more expensive than the other ones.
So back in the day, I actually traveled around with Ely Callaway when they brought out their ERC driver.
Yeah.
Right? It was basically illegal, right?
Right.
I mean, it had that sort of springboard effect, and so but his whole thing was the fact that this is nuts. I mean, even Arnold Palmer sort of endorsed it, and the USGA said, no, we can't do that. That's totally against the rules. I mean, if you're a purist, fair enough. But here was a story, because a friend of mine, he was a member at Pine Valley, and he had a severe back surgery. He had a rod stuck in his back, and he loved golf. And he actually used this driver, and he was actually able to carry some of those ditches and barrancas and whatever you want to call them, And so, but they actually disallowed, they wouldn't let him play in any sort of club event because it was an illegal club. So he basically gave up the game. And so you look at it and say, well, how crazy is that, So
anyway. Talking about, South African Timmy Clark, right? I mean, we haven't seen him since they banned long putter, probably for more than one reason. But I mean, he was very, very put out by that.
He was, yeah.
I mean, he didn't putt with a short putter since he was basically a kid, right?
No, so, that's right. Exactly.
I mean, that was an interesting one where they really went, let it go for a long time, and then they went back, which was interesting.
They should have banned it from the very beginning.
Right, exactly.
That was the thing, So it's like they let it go too long, and then and it's if you look at Bernhard Langer putting, I mean, obviously he's not holding against his chest, but it's pretty close, So it's not a whole lot different, So whether they go to all that kerfuffle, just the fact that he's 1 centimeter from his chest rather than on it, I don't know.
There's a lot more going on, between him and the ball.
Yeah.
So talking about equipment, isn't it interesting how people are very keen to, accept new technology and, lining up outside the store to get the latest thing. And then, you, throughout your career, have been accused of being new school versus old school. And now we've probably gone beyond. You're now old school, and there's now a new school.
Yeah.
And, so it's interesting how the golf, like instruction industry, stroke players, consumers, whatever, are relatively conservative in accepting, new technologies and things like that. But, in the golf club business, it's, 20 yards a year, every year,
right.
With the new equipment. So what's your experience in terms of, I mean, you were perceived as being very cutting edge, and, for those who know you, we know that you're still thinking that way. But early in your career, I would say that you had that kind of stigma of, the modern swing versus, what potentially was the old swing, which,
right.
still 2 arms, 2 legs, and a torso flailing away in space.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do a whole lot. I mean, look, I just packaged things a little differently, and sort of put in a way that, look, I've always believed that, look, that for the most part, look, you've got 2 major elements to a swing, right? You've got your trunk and you've got your arms, hands, and club, right? So how those synchronize together is what it's all about, right? Hopefully through adopting, a pretty good setup position, a good posture. And so, you know, there's different elements of that. I mean, we know, I mean, look, if you're dealing with some 85-year-old gentleman there who, you know, can't move, well, yeah, you're probably going to put more emphasis on the hands and the arms. I mean, that's logical.
Yeah, right.
So, but a player learning to develop the right body movement, the fact that we know that power comes from the body, you know, it comes from the ground, it comes from the way that, you know, the way you create torque and it's actually, you know, your arms and hands are really conduits, you know.
Well, then they still deliver it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you know, I heard this, you know, my good friend Brandel Chambly, who's obviously quite, you know, anyway, I don't want to sort of get on.
You know, he's very clear of his own opinion.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, I mean, he was saying that, oh, no, I can't understand why Patrick Reed's going to see David because he's old school now. It's all about power, not accuracy, which is nonsense, really. I mean, look, there, I think for a period of about 3 months, when Bryson started doing all this stuff and having his 9 protein shakes a day, people were really into the power. So, okay, we've got to get power. I mean, even Rory was talking about, which was nuts. I mean, the fact the guy, as far as he hits it, I mean, look, I mean, I don't think power is Rory's issue. I mean, and we know power is important for sure. But I mean, the fact is, I think you're seeing players. You're hearing rumblings now that players are saying, "Well, I can't do what Bryson's doing." You know, I'm just like Tony Finau, who's got plenty of power, right? He said, "No, I'm just working on my short game." You know,
right?
You know, you got to look at it like that. I mean, this game goes through phases, and it's really, I mean, look, it's very interesting what Bryson's doing. But it's a bit of a one-off, to be honest. I mean, not everyone's going to hit it 360. Okay, so
yeah, and then you know, different people have different ceilings, right? You know, from a physical standpoint. And he obviously, I mean, you know, he's done some great work. You know, all credit to everyone involved. But but he had a high ceiling.
And you don't know the ramifications. You know, 3 or 4 years down the road, is he gonna snap his knee? Is he going to, you know, burst a disc? Who knows? I mean, you can't tell. I mean, you know, you would think he's going to have a sort of shorter career than most swinging like that. I mean, I'd like to see him swing like that when he's 40 years old. But, you know, I mean, at that point, he's probably won 6 majors and won about 100 million. So who cares? But but I think the interesting thing is it's like, look, it's yes, we know a lot more about, you know, I mean, as you're studying, you know, understanding of biomechanics and how energy and forces are working in the swing, and you've got to have a body to be able to do that.
Right.
And so for the younger player, somebody who's really sort of looking at sort of trying to reach that top level, yeah, that's important because they're serious athletes. And so, I mean, maybe if a little bit of that filters down to the average player where they can improve their flexibility and maybe increase their rotational ability and ultimately increase their club head speed and ball speed and as you say, hitting it out the middle of the club face. But it's still, you know, I mean, look, the thing, okay, you take, say, like Patrick Reed, okay, so the interesting thing for me, looking at him is, you know, when we started working, you look at the statistics through the years, and I say this guy has never been inside the top 100, you know, with fairways hit or greens in regulation. So with his short game, if we can get his, you know, his longer game up to a sort of par with his short game, we're probably doubtful, but if we can get him to hit more fairways and get him to hit more greens in a way that he can hit them closer, right? Because that's a big deal, right? I mean,
proximity, right?
More than anything,
right?
Because I mean, the way that guy putts, I mean, because if he hits at 10 feet compared to 20 feet, he's gonna get a lot of low scores.
That's right.
So you know, for Brown to say, "Oh, it's a power game now, it's not accurate," that's nonsense. Because if you traditionally, throughout history, you look at it, great players have been great iron players.
That's
great
right.
iron players. Okay,
no doubt about it.
Drive it a long way, great. Okay, but hey, I don't care whether you're hitting wedges or 9 irons or 8 irons, hitting short irons, but you got to hit those irons close, because if you're hitting at 30 feet as opposed to 10 feet, you are not going to score.
Yeah, you look at like a Lazaval or a Bernard Langer, who, you know, both won at Augusta.
Exactly. I mean, you know, they've got control. They control their flight.
Correct.
They control the shape, control the distance.
Right.
And so, I mean, and you know, you have to look at Jack Nicklaus, who basically was the pin high king, right? I mean, every shot he hit was pin high, right? And so, you know, I mean, hey, look, if Jack Nicklaus wasn't as great an iron player as he was, he wouldn't have had the record that he had. So it's still, there's still room in this game. Yeah, you can hit it somewhere on the fairway, or not necessarily even on the fairway. If you can hit it where you've got an approach to the green and you're a great iron player, you're going to be, assuming that you're a decent putter and, your short game's up to snuff, where you can, for the green that you miss, you can up and down it. Then, that's how you're going to play well. It's not like you don't have to hit. Not everybody's going to hit it 360. Okay, I can tell you.
That's true. Hey, my buddy Rajan from
admittedly, but
my buddy Rajan from Sunningdale. I'm sure you've been there a bunch of times. He's asking, when you change someone's long game, does their short game action change simultaneously?
It's interesting. I mean, I think if you look back at Tiger, no disrespect to Sean Foley, I mean, he's a great teacher, but when the things that Sean was working with Tiger on his swing, it sort of affected his short game. So it can do, and you've got to be really careful. And that's one of the things, actually, using Patrick Reed as an example, when he went to play at Wentworth at the PGA, we actually suggested, because we changed his grip.
Right.
And I said, listen, I want you to use your old grip for your short game, because the fact is, he has such a wonderful short game because he fans the club face open. In actual fact, what we're doing in the longer game is actually getting his club face in a much more closed or neutral position. But I mean, it didn't work with the little pitches. So we had to sort of almost. I mean, he's figured it out now, but in the beginning we actually got him to use the same grip, because he actually fanned the club face open in such a way that he used the bounce. So it can affect the short game. Absolutely, it can. So you have to be careful there, because it's and that's obviously a judgment call as a coach, because look, I mean, the last thing you want to do is sort of ruin somebody's short game. I mean, because that's their bread and butter, right? And so yeah, I mean, to answer the question, absolutely.
So let me think. Oh yeah. So how do you use JJ over the years? I mean, you and JJ worked together for many years, right?
Mm.
How do you kind of lean? How do you lean on him, and how does he kind of come up with new stuff for you and change your thinking? And
yeah, I mean, look, he got me thinking a lot more about the fact that it's interesting when you look. Obviously, one of the biggest advances in teaching of the last 25 years, was video, right? I mean, 2D, right, where you can actually see something and you can slow it down and you can analyze it. I mean, obviously now we're a lot more advanced with 3D and force plates, etc. And so, with JJ, what he explained to me, he said, a lot of what you see in 2D is not necessarily what you actually get, because it's, all the study with force plates and 3D, it's almost like, that's like an MRI of the
swing.
You see the internal workings, right? The 2D is like an X-ray. You just see the external thing. Okay, well, that's wrong, this is wrong. So, because in the end, it's all about energy, how you transfer energy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember back in the day, before I actually even met JJ, I did a little bit of work with a guy called Chris Welch. Okay,
I remember. Welch, I was there I was at your place in '97 when he was bringing the cube out, and
yeah, that's right. I mean, it was very antiquated. But
the interesting thing was, as great a career as Nick Price had, it kind of validated it, right? He said he had an unbelievable sequence and things like that at that time.
Yes and no. I mean, because actually, I had Ernie there at the same time, and we did him. So I say, you got this cube, and you sort of calibrated it, and you put it on a VHS tape, then you sent it off by FedEx, and then it would come back a week later, and you had, all these sort of, his the graphs and so on. And so, and if you looked at it, I mean, Ernie was way more efficient than Nick, way more efficient. But I mean, in the way that his energy transfer, lower to upper
kinematic sequence,
but Nick, I mean, obviously, probably one of the best iron players, middle iron players, probably in the history of the game. I mean, possibly. I mean, because even Ben Crenshaw said, hey, Nick Price had the sound of Hogan when he struck the ball. I mean, it was that bullet that came off the club face. But it was interesting that, so Nick had, as strong as he was in the upper body, he was a water skier when he was young and very strong in the upper body. I mean, if you look at during his heyday, he was almost dead square at impact. to the ball. He had his hips were hardly open, his chest was dead square, and his forearm strength was just like, power the club through the ball.
Right.
And so, and I think, you look at it where Ernie had that sort of, effortless sort of movement there, where he was able to sort of generate that speed with not a lot of apparent effort. And so it was really interesting when you look at the different profiles that they had as far as how they actually struck the ball. So it's not to say that one profile is necessarily better than another. It's just that, obviously how repeatable is it? What do they do? What do they do coming into the impact area, before impact, at impact, post impact? And so, because the greats are able to somehow figure out how to get it back then.
Absolutely.
Hey, the greats probably compensate better than anybody else. So,
compensate is not necessarily a bad thing, right? So compensate could be a good thing.
So
coordinate.
Yeah. So getting back to JJ, look, he's worked. What I like about he's worked with so many different type of sports athletes, and he's worked with Zidane. He helped him change his, because Zidane was a right-footed kicker. He helped him change to a left-footed kicker. He's worked with skiers. He did a study actually with way back when Roger Federer first came on the tennis tour, and Agassi was still going strongly. Now Agassi had a double-handed backhand, and Federer, he sort of has this classic,
beautiful
flowing backhand, which is just effortless. And he said the amount of effort that Agassi was putting into it compared to Federer, he said that's why Agassi was injured all the time.
Interesting.
The stress and the strain he had to use. So it was really interesting. He did studies on the Dakar rally drivers. He designed sort of the neck brace for them, the amount of G-force on their neck. So just listening to him, and he himself, he's a great athlete. He actually held the world record for windsurfing at a certain distance. I don't know what distance it was back in the 80s. So he's an athlete, and as he said, you look at people that everybody's DNA is so different. He's very much into, I don't think there's one player athlete. He had like Lindsey Vonn, for instance. She worked a lot with JJ, and so, but he actually gets orthotics put in, designed in such a way so people actually are using the ground in such a way that they're maximizing their energy. So it's really fascinating. It's a fascinating area, and he just doesn't call it biomechanics. He said it's applied biomechanics. Because applied biomechanics is very different, because you apply it to different people in different ways.
I had that.
And so how efficient it is, it's like a lot of biomechanics study, as you well know, is done through robots. And it's like, okay, but we're not robots. And, so if we've got our right leg is 1 inch shorter than the other, and we've got more flexibility in our left trap than our right trap, these things make a difference. So it's very interesting how, he's designed equipment. There's a company in France called LPG, and where you actually had to sort of use both sides of your body to actually try to balance the right side and the left side, because there's always, generally in golf, right? There's an imbalance between left side and right side.
Absolutely.
So it's really fascinating. So to me, it was sort of like a new frontier, if you will, and just bouncing things off. I could see things, and I couldn't necessarily put it into sort of into the same language that he would put it, but he said, a lot of what you're seeing, because when I wrote that book, The Golf Swing, Terry, at the time, Centinela Hospital in Los Angeles, they were actually the people that provided the fitness van on tour.
Oh, interesting.
And so back then, I remember, because my wife Kelly went through it, they actually used to put, they put these electrodes and then put actually almost, it was like they actually almost like pins into people, and they sort of wired plays up there to see what muscles were firing, and it was
can't do that these days.
Back in,
you get sued.
Late 80s, and so but they said to me, and they said to me, "Where'd you get your knowledge with this book?" So I said, "Well, it's just sort of a bunch of stuff really that's I've accumulated over the years through study and testing and research and talking to people and getting ideas from different players, coaches, and stuff. He said, well, it's amazing. He said, because he said, a lot of what you've written in the book, that's what we use as a basis for our study, or our study proved that actually, because we could have written that book. I said, wow, that's amazing. So it was quite a compliment. But so, you know, as I say, I think, you know, it's fascinating how the human body actually works and why golf swings are so different. And that's why, I mean, look, there's never, I mean, who really, I mean, I can't think of anybody, maybe you can, I can't think of anybody, you try to copy somebody else's swing and being successful. I mean, you know, I mean, all right, the great player, Larry Nelson, said, oh, I try to copy Ben Hogan's swing. If you think back, you know, Larry Nelson's swing looked like Ben Hogan's swing, well, I mean, he tries tested, but
that's
I mean,
right.
There's no ways it looked like that. I mean, he might have thought he did, thought he copied maybe a couple of elements, but I mean, there's just no way. I mean, we're all so completely different. I mean, we're just, you know, like our bodies are like fingerprints. It's completely different.
Totally. So how do you, when you get someone come in, you know, how do you make your decisions, you know, going forward? Do you make some small steps first and kind of see how they react, or, you know, what's your kind of initial first phase of coaching?
You know, it's interesting. It's an interesting question, and I sort of actually I had to ask myself that question a few years ago. You know, people said, "Well, how do you know what you're going to work on? What are you going to do? What do you do first?" And it's like, you know, and I really thought about it, and you know, actually, what I do, it's funny, and I do it instinctively. I actually picture the way this person swings, okay, or should swing, okay, or in my mind, how this person could swing, okay, probably the best way to describe it. And then I actually work towards that. That's my sort of, you know, how I get there. Maybe it might be a couple of different tweaks, but I actually have a sort of a picture in my mind, you know, because I'm pretty visual. And I sort of see how I think this person could swing. And maybe swinging like a rusty gate, but I mean, I could, you know, because
you can see the potential in it.
I can see, yeah. I think I could see this. Even from a posture standpoint, you know, well, if I can get them to set up to it this way, I mean, despite the fact that it might not be technically correct, okay, maybe, you know, for somebody, all right, I've got a young lady who I work with, you know, an English girl on the tour, Jodie Hewitt, okay, and so she's been having some serious back problems. She's probably the top 5% ball strikers on tour, but she's had some back problems. And she said to me, look, I've got to make some changes, or I'm going to have to quit playing. And I said, okay. So I've sort of, I pictured, you know, she's always had a sort of a tilty action, almost like a little bit of a, you know, a reverse look, you know, almost a stack and tilt slight look, you know. And but she's such a good ball striker, and she sort of comes up out of it, but it's like action reaction, and it's a beautiful draw and solid, you know. And it's like, if I had my druthers, I wouldn't change it. But I mean, because of out of necessity with her back, I said, okay, we're going to have to make some change. So I sort of visualized how, okay, this person, if I look at her, okay, we're going to try to get we're going to get a posture more erect. We're going to get a shoulder plane shallower, and we're going to still try to keep the uprightness of the swing. But she actually felt like she's like literally 6 inches upper body 6 inches behind her lower body now compared. I mean, it isn't, but it's it is somewhat different. And so it would say that I sort of had this picture, and that because in the beginning we worked on some things, and we worked on actually a little more of a tilty action. But you know, sometimes as a coach you've got to change things. But I mean, so you look at things and you sort of you go by. I mean, I don't sort of, even with video, and I mean, if you set up with video and you know you got your TrackMan numbers and you got video, I don't necessarily say, okay, well, I'm going to go down the line first of all to check the plate, and I'm going to go face on there to check the body. It's like, you know, my instincts are, okay, well, let's get a couple from here, a couple from there, maybe a couple from behind, a couple over the camera, whatever. But I mean, it's like, I don't have a sort of set format. I'm very sort of, you know, I'm a bit sort of, you know, I don't know, a little.
Well, you're a human being, and it's a human game, right? I mean,
yeah, I'm not rigid in my thinking. So, and I think that's important as a coach and a teacher, and you can learn so many things. I've never, look, you have preferences in the way you think things could be done or should be done. But I mean, look, there's things where if you go back in the day, you know, somebody like a Jimmy Ballard, who was quite, you know, he was a little different in the way that he thought about things. And so, I mean, the way he moved off the ball, and now, I mean, personally, I mean, it's like, I didn't necessarily agree with it completely, for sure, although obviously it helped a lot of people like Curtis Strange and Hal Sutton back in the day. But yet, you know, you sort of look at that and say, you know what, well, that's going to work for certain players. And so you never sort of just cut yourself off and say, you know, whether you agree with Stack and Tilt or not. I mean, it's like, you know, there's some players that are going to benefit from that sort of slight reverse look. And so, you know, it's interesting. I don't know. That's, to me, everybody that comes, it doesn't matter what level of player they are. To me, it's almost like it's like a new case. It's like, you know, being a detective and figuring out, okay, what are we going to do here? And that's the challenging thing. That's why I enjoy it so much. I mean, if it was just same old, it was like, it'd be boring.
Well, you mentioned very early that you enjoy it because you can help people. But I think, you know, the way that you talk about the puzzle of golf, it's enjoyable because it's a puzzle too, right? It's like, you know,
yeah, it's a mystery, right? I mean,
and it's fun to come up with an equation that works. I find that's really fun for me.
No, I'll get some of our coaches, you know, we've got a lot of coaches all over the world, and I get, you know, we have seminars and I like, actually, rather than just sort of talking about teaching or lecturing about it, I say, okay, well, watch me, you know, so get your student there, and I'll do some things, honestly, at times, and I literally, it's like, as we mentioned, I mean, you know, if you ask a tall player to hit a low fade about 30 feet, and they'll do it, and they really won't know how they did it, they just do it, it's instinct, right? And so I'll do some things sometimes when I'm teaching, coaching, and that people ask, well, why'd you do that? And I sort of have to think about it a little bit. Well, it's because of this. It's not necessarily sort of cut and dried, right? It's A plus B equals C. It's like, and I think that's the thing we've got to be careful of. We don't pigeonhole all instruction into, okay, well, you do it this way, you do it that way, and this person's built like that, so we've got to do this. It's like, you know, there may be a case somebody with short arms, okay, that everything's going to be really connected. But yet, there again, they may be better off by actually being disconnected. You know, it's like, so
that's right.
Absolutely.
Well, that's where you know, the perception of what you do and who you are is two very different things based on my experience of spending time with you.
Well, you know, I hope that I've never liked to call myself a method teacher, although I've obviously been accused of that. I mean, and I think sort of working with somebody like a Nick Faldo through the years, especially, you know, back then, it's like, oh, well, it's so mechanical. You know, but, you know, he was actually one of the least mechanical people you can imagine. He was completely, I mean, he'd take the mechanics, absolutely, but then he just transferred into a feel. And I think that's the key. The key for teaching, if I had to sum it up, the key for teaching is be able to transfer mechanics into feel. If you can get somebody to feel what they're doing, because feeling it and thinking it are way different.
Yeah, I mean, I've took an hour of your time, David. My big lessons from talking to you is it seems like you're a great listener. You're a great communicator. You put yourself in other people's shoes. There's all these skills that really don't get you know, discussed on the internet and things like this, and don't really get rewarded. But you know, you've spent obviously time with a lot of great teachers, and I have too. And the human skills are not very sexy, but they're essential. I think that's reasonable to say based on listening to you. Is, you know, lots of experience plus.
Yeah, as a coach and a teacher, I mean, look, for a start, I mean, if you listen to some golf lessons, they're boring as hell, right? I mean, it's like, and I always think, you know, teaching with a bit of humor and I mean, is important because, you know, especially, look, all right, not necessarily a tall player who's, you know, just about, you know, teed up at Augusta or something. I mean, you got to be serious. But I mean, the fact of the matter is
make sure you keep sharp objects away from them.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, just have a bit of humor. You know, make it an enjoyable experience for people, because it's an experience. I mean, yes, they want to get better, but also, you know, there's a liaison between a player and a coach, and there's a you know, there's a chemistry that you've got to create, and that's how you get on. And it's like, you know, some people say it's like, as coaches, look, I mean, I've lost players and I've got players, and they've come, they've gone, they've come back again. It's like, you know, that's the way it works. I mean, even at the top level. But I think, you know, in coaching and teaching, I mean, if you could make an enjoyable experience for people, I mean, to me, it's like it's a very rewarding profession, because you're actually, I mean, yeah, we're not maybe necessarily saving lives, although in some cases, I mean,
maybe
you probably are. You know, they probably want to slit their throats after shooting 103 or something. But I mean, the thing is, it is a, you know, I've loved, I mean, people say, how would you change what you've done? I said, I wouldn't change a thing, because it's been enjoyed. You know, I mean, I've had a great opportunity. I've met so many great people, traveled all over the world, and it's like, it's fun, and it's like, you know, it's I say it's not life or death, but as we know, golf means so much to so many people.
That's right.
And if we can, and to me, if you can actually help people with their golf in many different ways, whether, hey, you give them a little exercise program, whatever, you're actually improving their quality of life, which is
that's right.
Which is a huge thing.
Well, especially the holistic nature of it, and if you can get them to eat a little bit better and move a little bit more and things like that, in the guise of improving their golf, that's a good tool.
Yeah, yeah. No,
did you have some extra steamed broccoli to celebrate Patrick's win?
Yeah, we've actually got him on a healthy kick right now. You know, he's got his nuts and raisins now, as opposed to, you know, what it is. Yeah, I mean, he had a sort of a southern diet, shall we say? I'll leave it at that.
Oh, wow.
He's excited about the fact that he's actually starting to get a little healthier, and you know, because it's an all-round program, right? And if you get excited about the fact, as I said to him, I said, look, how do you know how much energy you're losing on the back nine? You know, not eating or not drinking, right, or what have you. So, you know, so it's, I mean, you know, we've got our junior academy, and it's nice to pass on this information to the kids, because the kids, right, I mean, I think it behooves us as coaches and teachers to really bring the younger generation on, not only just to improve their golf games, which is important, obviously, but the fact is, I mean, especially in this day and age where, you know, there's so much going on for these kids and they can get into so many bad things. But I mean, golf is a game that they get into that holistic outlook, and they work hard. And I mean, as we know, there's so much of golf is parallels life, doesn't it?
That's right.
Do. And so, you know, diet is one of those things, exercise, and, you know, it's, you know, I mean, I suppose Gary Player would be a sort of walking example of that, somebody who just loves life, enthusiastic, and still trying to get better, you know. I mean, every time I see him, he said, hey, check this out, how's my left wrist look, you know, I don't want any of this stuff now, you know, I want that now. Okay.
I gave him a book recently, and he was so excited because it validated a bunch of the health stuff that he was doing all his life.
No, for sure. So no, it's great.
I could keep you on for another hour or two, but I really appreciate it.
We'll do it again. We'll have part 2. So
luckily,
I want to congratulate you all the good work you're doing. It's great, man. You've done really well for yourself, and it's nice to look at all the stuff that you're doing, and you know, it's keep up the quest. You know.
Well, I think, you know, we share the desire to, it's almost like an OCD-ness to keep getting better. And I mean, every person that comes in front of you, you do your best, but you always feel like, you know, could have been a little bit better. And I think those kind of things are the things that I want to communicate to the teachers, and what you've represented today has been great in terms of, you know, the big thing that you've said over and over is what we call rapport, right? So you have to have a, you know, good communication with the person you're with and all that sort of thing. So, you know, I always like to go beyond, you know, the teaching part of it when I talk to great coaches like yourself, because there are so many skills that have made you who you are in your career, in addition to, you know, making sure that the club face is, you know, parallel to the spine or not, you know, halfway back or whatever it is. So yeah, I appreciate that.
That's true. There's a lot more to it than that. And as I say, it's, you know, it's always great not only to help help players, but to help coaches and teachers come along. And we've had some great teachers who've come through us. You know, but
incredible.
You know what I always say, Terry. You see, because that's why I keep myself, you know, sort of real, shall we say. You know, the fact is that you know, I might teach them all they know, but I don't teach them all I know.
That's a good one. You know, and you know, like I said, mostly impressed with your intelligence. It's just your unwavering determination to support the Lily Whites is something I just can't understand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, the way Spurs are playing, I think I'm going to support Villa now anyway. So.
Yeah, no, well, you got your Grealish. He's going to be an unbelievably great player.
What a great player that guy is! Yeah.
David, I appreciate everything over the years. You've been a great inspiration,
right, and we'll be in touch there. We'll see you down the road.
Yes, sir.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you, mate. All the best. See you.
Bye.